So you're probably used to me being my happy, energy-filled self, but right now, lately, I've really been struggling. I've been so far away from my personally perceived identity after a very serious first hospitalization experience of mine. And no, this had nothing to do with the current pandemic, though part of me wishes that I had actually fallen ill through that road, which you're about to find out why. I'm using this opportunity to share with you about this experience while also stepping into the challenging side of being raw and vulnerable with you, as this specific action of vulnerability is one of the biggest things that I used to actually run away from throughout most of my life. So here goes. I've actually tried doing this 2 other times, which was just filled with so much emotion that you would have literally been watching a crybaby for the whole of this video. Nothing against emotions. Let it flow when it's gotta go is what I like to say. But now that I've recovered more since my hospitalization, I feel a lot more centered and not so much in a huge victim mindset that I was. Anyways, on April 15th, after 4 days of excruciating abdominal pain that was spreading up to my kidneys and down as far as my jewels, I made my way to the emergency room to find out that I had a ruptured appendix, with the infection having spread pretty far around. The pain I was feeling was from my body's protection mechanism against infection that set off severe inflammation in certain organs of my abdominal cavity. Before this all happened, I had recently finished a bulking phase and started taking daily transformation photos for the cut I was starting. And I look at them now and feel really silly that I didn't take note of how insanely bloated I was alongside of that abdominal pain that I was experiencing to actually get me to the hospital sooner. But I'm here and recovering, which is all that matters. Now, there were a lot of parts to this that I'm not going to get into, but from what I understood, if your appendix bursts, there's nothing much more you can do other than hope the painkillers suffice while you're being pumped full of antibiotics and pray for what you hope to be a short hospital stay. It was far from being short. I was, however, very grateful that the doctors were super optimistic while they were in my presence when they said,
"Hopefully it won't be more than a couple of days."
and at that time, just the thought of spending 3 days in that level of pain, barely able to move, with no visitors due to the lockdown, was more than I wanted to mentally digest. Now, don't get me wrong, the painkillers were great. They helped me to get up on the 3rd day and actually start walking, though I also needed my ass verbally kicked by an awesome Jamaican nurse that put me to tears when she said, "John, you can't just lay in bed the whole time." That was certainly my biggest crybaby moment. But within the hour, I was surprisingly on my feet, moving around, high-fiving her through the ether for that gentle verbal push that came through in her epic accent. It wasn't the greatest walk, though even with having to push my IV stand around, I managed to get in some fancy footwork, regardless of how terrible my balance was. The experience was so surreal, as I never thought I'd actually be attached to an IV with the health that I've been experiencing the past many years resulting from my daily actions. If you've ever had to experience a long hospital stay, it's actually really important for the most part to walk around, because lying in bed can create way more complications, so make sure to keep that in mind. Now, before I went to the hospital, I could obviously feel something wasn't right, and I was called to start a longer-term fasting game to give my white blood cells and immune system a serious boost. So I went at it with tons of bone broth and apple cider vinegar for 3 days before going to the hospital. Fast forward to my 7th day in the hospital, and I could finally ingest more than a tablespoon of water at a time without feeling nauseous. Yet the pain was still super intense. It was like a dozen dull knives slowly puncturing my insides, along with these involuntary, terrible contractions. Needless to say, on day 8, I was given the good news that my body had collected the infectious bacteria into its own homegrown container, or what's called an abscess, and it was ready to be drained. Little did I know, though, that this drain tube was actually going to be in me 5 times longer than we all initially thought. Anyways, within 24 hours of drainage, the abdominal pain was actually subsiding, but now I had the pain of a tube going through my abdominal wall to feel. Now, I have to apologize that I sound like a huge complainer in this moment, and honestly, the biggest challenge I had when I tried to film this video a few weeks ago was this huge level of shame I felt for being so depressed about this experience. It was as if what I was going through deserved no compassion, something that's definitely within my subconscious mind that I certainly need to transform. And while this was really difficult, I made good use of this by flowing those emotions out on paper, journaling to really help me through it. Part of me feels like a completely different person for the fact that I'm actually sharing this publicly, but this is a part of our growth and transformation that's imperative to work through the difficulties that we have in our human experience. And so while I thought this hospitalization was the hard part, which it definitely was, coming home is when it really hit me. The pain of having a tube 10 centimeters inside of my gut, and the severe mobility restrictions. I dove into such a dark place loaded with a total victimhood mentality, realizing that the simplest things I just couldn't do, like putting on socks, sitting down in most places, it felt like next to impossible. I think that what's made this so hard is that I've spent the last few years in such incredible climbing health that I swear I could feel this certain level of invincibility. Yet this appendix rupture was the downfall that likely made it that much harder to process this lengthy recovery I was needing to go through. To put this into perspective, 3 days before actually going to the hospital was the first lifting workout that I had missed in over 6 years. And I was okay with it at that time, but it was sure hard as ever to even grasp the fact that I would be going a few weeks without exercising, let alone 6. Seeing the muscle loss, having all of these self-care restrictions, mobility restrictions, continued pain, and just falling behind further and further week over week in my goals and content creation for Next Level Warrior weighed me down like crazy. In all of this, though, there was certainly a silver lining, as it's what I do my best to find in every situation and experience that I go through. We live in a world of duality, so there's always the light to find where there's darkness, regardless if we can't see it yet. I got to really take a step back and appreciate so much that I had really taken for granted, such as feeling strength in my step, walking without pain, getting a full night's sleep in what felt like forever, not to mention actually getting to sleep on my sides. I can't tell you how much I've missed the comfort of side sleeping. And now I get to test out my body's muscle memory recovery for the first time, while also witnessing a far greater transformation in myself, both physically and mentally. Sharing videos like this with you, talking more about personal challenges and the resulting massive personal growth in overcoming them, is definitely a part of what Next Level Warrior is. The Next Level Warriors are all of us in this time. Those of us who make the choice to overcome and learn from our adversities. Those of us that seek to gain greater understanding of ourselves and our minds, creating an intentional evolution of ourselves during the gift that we have to be alive on this earth. Now, for those of you that are curious as to how this all happened with my appendix getting infected and eventually exploding, it has to do with this tiny white dot right about there in my CT scan. I'll be sharing this info and a bunch more on this topic in my next video, which you'll very much want to stick around for, especially since 7% of you, 7% of the world's population is going to have an appendix problem in their life. And if I had known more about this, I could have actually saved 80% of my hospital stay and weeks off of my recovery time. So make sure that you're subscribed with the notification bell turned on to catch that next video. I am definitely back, and with every intention of continuing this content creation and growth journey with all of you. So I'll see you in the next one.